Okay, welcome everybody to our workshop meeting here regarding discussion and presentation to discuss retirement for city employees. It is 4 o'clock. With that, we are starting the workshop. And city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We actually have Anthony Mills on the line tonight. He is a TMRS representative, and I did send you guys his presentation. The idea of tonight's workshop is to provide you a little bit more insight. I know that there's been questions in the past in regards to what the city has for retirement, how do we fund it. I reached out to TMRS after they kind of said, hey, we're here to help email to ask if they could do a presentation to council to give you guys an understanding of how we really have done a great job making sure we've kept our funding at the level needed for those who do retire. But he's also going to discuss something that we haven't done in quite some time, and that is we have not actually initiated any type of cost of living for several years. I believe it's 20 something for retirees. That does affect what we withhold on our part to cover that cost of living increase. And I believe, I don't know if you can hear me. Anthony, can you hear me? You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
It's okay.
Hold on 1 second. We have a little technical issue on our end.
Okay.
There we go. So Anthony Mills is on Zoom for us tonight. It was an easier way to do it. Anthony, our council is here, and I do have your slides that I can screen share if you'll just let me know where you want to start.
Okay. For right now, we don't have to put any of the slides on the screen. I would just like to start out by saying first, thank you for having me at your meeting this evening. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Anthony Mills, Director of Education Services at the Texas Municipal Retirement System. And this evening, I wanted to spend just a brief time before going into any details of a possible plan change for the city of Alpine. I would like to give you just a little background about your plan before we begin so that you get a really good idea of the type of progress that, as Megan just mentioned to you, the progress that you've made in funding your plan itself. 938 cities participate in the Texas Municipal Retirement System, and a little over 100 of them have already reached the 100% funded ratio threshold. And it so happens that Alpine is one of those cities. Now, when we say 100% funded ratio, we are talking about the difference between the actual assets that you've accrued, the monies that you've paid into TMRS versus the actual cost of the benefits, the liabilities that you have in your current plan design. The city of Alpine right now sits at a little over 123% funded. You have a little over $1.8 million more in assets than you do in liabilities. And that's an important point to make that I will come back to before we conclude this evening. When looking at the plan itself, I want to remind you that it is a two-part plan in that the employees, the 93 employees who work and pay into TMRS there at Alpine, they're funding their base retirement benefit alongside the city that's also funding a portion of it. The city is making matching contributions to TMRS. The members there, all your employees, all 93 of them that participate, pay in 5% of their gross compensation out of every paycheck into TMRS. And annually, they earn interest on the monies in their personal TMRS accounts. The city is matching those dollars, but the note that I just made to you earlier, that your plan is overfunded by 23%, 123% is your funded ratio. The rate that the city pays, the contribution rate that you pay out of every payroll period, each month that you send contributions to TMRS, you're paying in 2024, pardon me, in 2025, you're projected to pay in 2.2%. 2.2% of the payroll to make a 2-to-1 match. So for employees who are paying in 5 and the city's matching 2-to-1, what TMRS does for a city that is overfunded, you basically will get a credit toward the contribution rate that you pay into TMRS. Something that I like to make sure that I point out to any governing body is this. The funding methodology that TMRS uses ensures that regardless of the plan design that you put in place, should you change the plan and add additional liabilities, that funding policy that we have in place ensures that you are still going to be on track to get back to 100% funded status. That's the case not just for Alpine, but for every one of the 938 cities that participate in TMRS. Now, with that said, I want to point out to you that while employees are paying in their 5% and the city is making the appropriate contributions to ensure that they're making the 2-to-1 match, the plan design itself, your plan has looked about the same for about the last 36 years, since 1988. That was really, well, let me take that back. You did make one major change in 2003. So 21 years ago, you did improve your matching ratio when you moved it to 2-to-1. That matching rate had been a 1-to-1 matching ratio. And in 2003, you did improve it to 2-to-1. The change itself, any employee who was working prior to 2003, all of their accounts had been matched at 1-to-1 leading up to that change. And from that point going forward, they were matched on a 2-to-1 basis. They did not get any retroactive benefit for the plan improvement that you made back in 2003. And if any of those employees are still on the books at the city, we've kept track of the portion of their retirement that is based on 1-to-1 match versus 2-to-1 match. And you may ask, well, why are you even discussing that? What does that have to do with plan changes today? I believe that one of the most important changes that would be under consideration would be to grant some type of cost of living adjustment. In order to grant a cost of living adjustment under TMRS's current statute, a city must adopt this provision called updated service credits. And the last time that Alpine adopted an updated service credit was in January 1988. That was the same year that you also adopted your first and only cost of living adjustments. So when looking back historically, Alpine's retirees have received one cost of living adjustment since the city joined TMRS in January of 1957. And if you were to grant some type of cost of living adjustment, that provision called updated service credit, which affects active employees, not retirees, that provision must be adopted in concert with, along with that cost of living adjustment. So Megan, if you would please add to the screen the rate letter. And in the rate letter, I want to make sure that after our meeting today, I'd like for you to be able to see exactly what we've discussed. And it's in great detail throughout this rate letter, but I think what is most important for you, if you would take me to screen number 3 or page number 3 in this document. It is the executive summary for the rate letter. This is the letter that we post for staff, and it shows you the reconciliation for the plan for your upcoming year to show you how we arrived at your contribution rate for 2025. You'll see a comparison here of the last valuation in 2022 versus the most recent valuation in 2023. And the one item that I would like to point out to you is in the middle of the page, you will find the actuarial value of your assets. When you look at the actuarial value of your assets, the $9.8 million right there in the middle of the screen, just about, that $9.8 million versus your actuarial accrued liability of $7.9 million. That's how we arrive at the $1.8 million that's over the actual liabilities that you have in your plan. In the actuarial information, that third line down, you will see the overage. And you'll see the funded ratio that I spoke about earlier, the 123% funded ratio. And if you're wondering, you're saying, well, I can see that in 2022, it was 123.2%, and now it's 123%. That means TMRS is trying to trend you back to 100%. Another way to say this is you have more assets on account today in TMRS than you're going to pay out in liabilities. There's no way for TMRS to cut you a check for the overage. So each year we take away a percentage from your rate so that your rate is less than it actually has to be. And we take away some of that overage to trend you back to 100%. And for 2025, that takeaway is 1.9% that comes away from your total contribution rate. If you make no change going forward, again, your rate for 2025 is 2.2%. To consider granting your retirees, currently you have 41 of them, to grant your retirees a cost of living adjustment, you would have to adopt, again, an updated service credit along with that cost of living adjustment. And if you were to do that, what I've included for you this evening are several different options to look at. The Alpine 2025 Plan Change Study, it shows you several different options from which you could choose. And what we're looking at here are not the only options that's available. So I want to make sure that I'm clear on that. If after the call you all decide, well, he gave us a lot of information, but I would like to see additional options, just know that there are additional options. But one of the things that I wanted to try and show were the possible options that you could adopt that would, yes, it would have impact on the contribution rate that you would make into TMRS, but when you look at the overall financials, it would also keep the plan at or about or a little over 100% funded. Option 1 shows you adopting a 50% updated service credit along with a 50% cost of living adjustment. And you'll notice that option 2 does the exact same thing with one exception. The real difference here is that for the cost of living adjustment, instead of adopting it on a retroactive basis, you would adopt it on a non-retroactive basis. What does that mean? It means that when TMRS calculates the COLA for the folks who are retired currently, we're not going to go back to the original year in which they've retired to figure out what the cumulative effect of inflation has been and then grant them 50% of that year-over-year impact of inflation. We wouldn't do that. Instead, we would only go back one study period. We're not looking retroactive. We're basically looking at the city adopting a COLA and keeping it in place by placing it on a recurring ordinance. And going forward, what you're saying is we will grant COLAs going forward. The intent would be to grant COLAs. That does not mean that a future council couldn't either reduce the percentage or turn it off altogether. They could. That would not take that option off the table. But what it would do is it would put in place a repeating or recurring COLA ordinance for your retirees. And then you would start funding that COLA, not just for your current retirees, but for your future retirees as well. The same way that you've funded their base retirement benefit and have gotten to 100% or well more than 100% funded status, you do the same under any of the options that you're looking at. Option number 3 also adopts an updated service credit and a cost of living adjustment, but you can see that I changed the percentage for the updated service credit. Instead of 50%, we went with 75%, a 75% updated service credit. And I've said updated service credit a few times already, and somebody on the dais is probably thinking, what does this guy mean by updated service credit? For active employees, the updated service credit provision, the optional provision that you could adopt by ordinance, what it does for the members is this. It can calculate an additional cash credit for which the liability is included in these studies that I'm showing you this evening. But that additional cash credit comes from looking at a formula that takes into account what a member, an employee there at Alpine, what their current salary is, and then looking back retroactively and saying, in essence, if this employee had always had salary that looked more like this salary today, what would he have contributed had he always paid in at 5% out of this salary and had a 2-to-1 matching ratio in place? You recall me mentioning at the outset that when you increased your matching ratio in 2003, no one got any retroactive benefit for that plan improvement, even those employees who may have been there much longer than 2003. When they had that 1-to-1 match, you simply started them getting a 2-to-1 match going forward. No retroactive look back because there was no updated service credit adopted along with that plan improvement. The previous updated service credit that had been granted was in 1988. So they missed out. But if any of them are still on the books, still working, this would capture that change. It would also take into account the salary improvements that have happened over time. And what we look at is what would that calculate to be under the updated service credit formula versus the actual dollars that the member has on account. The difference between the two is the additional cash credit. And we know what those numbers look like. And as I said, it shows up in the liability that you see on these three options in front of you. Same thing with the cost of living adjustment. We know who the current 41 retirees are. And we've already actuarially predicted of your 93 active employees, who's going to retire and at what age and for how long will they live and draw benefit from TMRS. And so we've included those future costs as well. And the city would begin advance funding those benefits before they would actually come due for the promise that is made if you were to make this plan change effective for January 2025. So those are the comparison of the alternate plan designs that you can look at just to give you an idea on the rate. Sometimes people want to see, well, what does that mean for the rate going forward? The projection report, which is the next report, can show you, can give you an idea if you were to adopt, in this case, the 50% updated service credit, along with a 50% COLA that's non-retro, you can see how the rate trends going forward for the next 8 years. And you can see where your funded ratio continues to trend toward 100%. This gives you an idea of what we project. Now, somebody is probably asking in dollars, what does this mean? You all could probably give us better dollars than we can estimate, but we do estimate those dollars. We call your valuation payroll $3.7 million, $3.76 million. The percentage that you would pay into TMRS would be the percentage of that payroll. You all would know your payroll better than we would, but we do predict it. If you were to make this type of plan change, when you look at the estimated contribution in the top of this page, you'll notice that we project you to pay in 2025 about $192,000 into TMRS. And then you can see that trend going forward. Some of the increase that you see, while the percentage changes just slightly, you can see that the dollar amounts continue to increase. And those dollar amounts continue to increase because we do project salaries, payroll to increase. And that is reflected in the dollar amounts. But you can also see that your funded ratio is projected to stay above 100% in this scenario. I want to skip over to the COLA analysis report. The COLA analysis report, as I mentioned, there are 41 folks who have retired from the city of Alpine. I wanted you to see the different options that would be available for the city to adopt. And if you were to adopt a repeating COLA for your retirees, you get to adopt it on either a retroactive basis where we would take into account the cumulative effect of inflation versus a non-retroactive COLA where we are only going to look back one study period to figure out how much to increase a person's retirement benefit. You can see the three different COLA options, 30%, 50%, or 70%, and how different your 41 retirees would be affected by the retroactive versus non-retroactive COLAs. I think this kind of brings it to light to give you an idea of what it would mean. Something else that I have not said, but you certainly could do. You have the option to adopt a one-time ad hoc COLA. As long as you adopt a one-time ad hoc updated service credit, you can do that. That's what happened back in 1988. It was a one-time deal. But it would, if you adopted the ad hoc COLA, it would allow you to look back retroactively and grant the cumulative effect of inflation for those retirees who have not gotten a COLA since 1988. And while this would not grant a COLA going forward, the numbers that you're looking at are still good numbers for 2005 if you were to just do a one-time COLA. But you would have to only look at the retroactive columns, if that makes sense. So what I would like to do now is make sure that a couple points are made. If you were to consider making the plan improvement, that is, adopt a cost of living adjustment, it has to be adopted along with an updated service credit. You have the option to adopt it on a one-time basis. I can run a scenario for you if you would like to see that, but you also have the option, because of the funded status of your plan, there are repeating options that are available, and those were included for you to look at. Some of those, not all of them, but some of those were included for you to look at this evening and consider. And it would still allow you to keep your plan either near or over 100% funded. I wanted to make sure that you saw those this evening. I would like to remind you that any scenario, any plan improvement that you make, because of the actuarial funding policy that we have, the methodology that we have at TMRS, you're still going to get back on track to get back to 100% funded status over time. We've got a fixed amortization schedule that allows our cities, with the contributions that you make, to get back to that 100% funded status within a predictable time window. And that window that we use is a 20-year window. Cities can make additional contributions toward TMRS to either improve the amortization schedule itself, or to shorten that amortization schedule itself, or to lower the rate as you continue on that set closed amortization schedule. And with that, I want to open it up for any detailed questions that you might have.
I do want to point out to council that we have a 5-year vesting. So after 5 years, our employees are automatically vested with our retirement program, and it's 20 years. So it's not really a combination of, it's 20 years of service. And I think that's important to understand, because there's other entities around us that their vesting period is 8 years. And one of the reasons why I brought this before the council is also when we talk about compensation studies and we talk about the benefits of our employees. You have 9 employees that can retire this year. So we do have a larger retirement group. And like he mentioned, Mr. Mills, We have not done anything for our retirees. It's not really a benefit at this point. So I wanted to have this conversation so that we could turn it around and hopefully consider what we could do as far as when we say we have a great retirement system, this is why.
And I would like to add, when I looked at the retirees from Alpine, I believe that number was close to 80% of them still live within 25 miles of City Hall. And any improvement in the retirement benefit, the adjustments upward on the pay that they're receiving from retirement is also going to be used right there in the local economy.
Councilmember Nance?
Guess I have one question, Mr. Mills, then is this similar to a pension? So the money they receive from this, there's no tax benefits, it's just treated as income by the IRS?
It is treated as pension income, as you said at the outset. It is pension income. And the monies that go into the account, since they go in on a pre-tax basis and grow tax deferred, they are taxable when they come out. But generally, we find our retirees in a lower tax bracket during their retirement years.
So this would be similar to a traditional IRA or a 457B?
Similar, but it is a true pension plan. Under the tax code, it is considered a defined benefit plan, but it really looks in some ways like a defined contribution plan, like you mentioned, 401k or 457 or 403b, in that it's the balance that has a lot to do with calculating what the benefit will be. The difference is, in our plan, we've got a lifetime guaranteed benefit that is, the formula is included, and that makes it a defined benefit plan under the tax code.
So would I be correct to say this is similar to TRS, like the teacher retirement system?
It is, in the fact that, in the way that it's going to ensure a lifetime monthly benefit, yes. We are one of the sister systems, the Teachers Retirement System of Texas, Employees Retirement System of Texas, Texas County and District Retirement System, the Judicial Retirement System, City of Austin Employees Retirement System, and the Texas Municipal Retirement Systems make up what is known under state law as the Texas Proportionate Retirement Program.
Councilmember Stevens?
Megan, I think I heard you say it's a 5-year vesting and 20 years before they can collect. Okay. And when we go through the whole compensation study, are you going to provide us a sense of perspective about the markets we're operating in and how this compares with the others?
So the website itself, TMRS has done a lot to push cities to do exactly that.
Yeah.
Compare yourself to others. So there's actually a application on their website that allows us to compare our city benefits to other city benefits. Our compensation study isn't focused primarily on benefits. It's really focused on the salary side. We included a brief discussion of it, but we're not going to full comparison.
So,
But I can do that through the portal and get you
Okay.
kind of like, this is Marfa, this is us.
Yeah, there we go. Okay,
With the members of TMRS.
that's fine. What's not clear, and part of it, I'm a market-based guy, so I'm looking at what's the market and how do we compare against others from an overall salary, compensation benefits associated with that. So it's difficult to make an assessment about what we should do considering the current option 1, option 2, option 3, without understanding that data. What assumption have you made for the go forward budget relative to this?
So the way the budget is set up right now, it's based off of no changes whatsoever.
No change. Okay.
When we got the initial email from TMRS is when I reached out and said, hey, I think we need to look into this, especially as we talked about benefits and we're trying to retain and we're trying to attract people.
Yeah.
For some, retirement is a big thing.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to be able to have that conversation with council and go back and say, okay, we are gonna make adjustments and what is it gonna affect the budget?
Yeah.
It is about a 3% increase, 3 to 4% increase over what is currently budgeted in retirement.
Because I'm thinking, there's no age tied to the 20 years of eligibility.
No.
Yeah.
I can, so, I mean, as you're aware, I can retire. I
Yeah.
am not at retirement age for any other system.
Right,
And we've had one other employee retire at 43.
yeah.
Once they hit their 20, they become eligible.
And is 20 years common across the whole TMRS system, or is that unique to Alpine?
I've seen it common. Anthony, are there other cities who have different requirements for the years of service?
We still, of our 938 cities, we still have about 200 of them that have a 25-year retirement. Most of our cities, all of those that have come in since 1996, and the majority of our cities are 20-year cities.
Wow, I'm just amazed at that. Yeah, I'm just, because with everyone going to 401ks and all the other things associated with that, you know, having a retirement at 40 years, you can retire. Come to work at 20, you can retire at 40. My goodness. And then you look and say, so why do you want to incentivize someone to retire at a young age and have all that knowledge walk out the door?
May I add?
Sure.
What we see it's more than anecdote. What we see more often, Councilman, is that employees, when they reach that place of becoming eligible to retire, it's almost just the opposite. It becomes an incentive to stay, because what we see is the benefit, because of the way the compound interest works in TMRS, that benefit starts to improve more exponentially later in a person's career than earlier. You could have two employees at Alpine who start working on the same day and will both work for 20 years and both become eligible to retire. Both had the same salary history, meaning they've got the same cash balance. The only difference between these two employees who hypothetically retire on the same day is that one is 20 years older than the other. So one started at age 40, the other started at age 20. So now they're 60 and 40, but both eligible to retire. The 60-year-old in TMRS gets a larger benefit, because what we do to calculate that retirement benefit is we take the person's age, convert it to their mortality to figure out how we divide that pot of money. So the older you are, the less daylight you've got left, in theory. So you get a larger benefit in TMRS than the younger employee. So while it's a benefit to be able to say, I can retire, when in reality, it is not always to the person's advantage to retire so young, because they start to see that benefit improve better than it did earlier in their career.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm just a little bit of my background. I had 175,000 employees, pension plan of $83 billion. So understanding the background behind that's calculated would be very helpful, because what it sounds like is you're actually creating for each individual their pot of money, and then actuarially you determine what that benefit's going to be based upon age. Is that essentially what's going on?
You got it. You nailed it.
Okay. Okay, well, looking at your options you know, current option one, option two, option three, I could not buy into option one because immediately you start on the negative side from a actual liability and the city's gonna have to put more money in. And then I'm interested in seeing how option two and option three play out if we were to head down that path. So,
And there are other options. These were just ones that randomly picked.
yeah, okay, yeah, I just can't support option one at all. And I've seen too many cities where they start bumping up later on and then, well, we have social security systems in that trouble right now.
So the county currently pays over 10% to maintain their retirement.
Yeah, but where's the county financially?
I can't answer that.
Yeah,
one.
I
I
know.
can just say we're in such better shape
I know.
to
that's right.
make these decisions.
I know, that's why I say that we're making decisions that are not just for now, it's for the
Future.
10 to 20 years down the road.
And that's where if you look at the retroactive and he did make the comments, you can do it as a one-time deal. I personally think moving forward, this does need to be looked at more closely on a regular basis.
Yep.
Because we've talked about our employees, but we've never addressed our retirees.
Yep.
And the only benefit we do provide our retirees is retirement.
Well, and it goes back to retention and keeping folks on board. I mean, that's what we're about. Because we have enough problems when they lose employees. So, okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Cal.
I guess I had a couple questions, Mr. Mills, then, so the state of Texas, the mayor and I both work for education, so we're kind of, we're eligible with TRS and how that we get 60% when with our 5 highest years and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
My question is, we're making this decision because each city does this differently. I know the state of Texas just did this for teachers, I believe. They went out to the voters and asked for a one-time COLA raise for retirees. Am I correct?
I do recall that in the news recently. Yes. This past legislative session. Yes.
Is there a reason that that was chosen by the state to do that as far as a one-time COLA? Is it due to complexity or even risk aversion compared to these repeating COLAs?
Well, the TMRS Act and the way that it governs our plan is very different than the government code that governs the teachers' retirement system. The state legislature funds the teachers' retirement system and had chosen to go for a couple decades not granting cost of living adjustments. There were options for the state to grant COLAs without going back to the voters, but for the type of COLA that they wanted to grant and to be able to do it going forward, they did need to take it before the voters. In TMRS, that's not the case. It's local control on how your COLAs are treated. And you may find that your peer cities, whether it's peer cities in West Texas, or if you were to move around the state and look population-wise, for cities your size, most of them have some type of COLA provision in place. In TMRS, the other item, and I'll just be a bit more explicit about it, because we have an actuarial funding policy, entry age normal methodology that will take, if you were to grant cost of living adjustments, that we would take that liability and place it inside a fixed amortization schedule, and the benefit costs what it costs. What we're showing you in these alternate plan designs are the actual cost of these benefits. We're very transparent in the liabilities. There's nothing that you're not seeing here. And that's not always the case if you were to compare. I don't want to say specifically the teacher system, but when you look at other government plans that are broken, sometimes it's because those liabilities are not being funded on a fixed schedule. There is no end in sight. They can have runaway liabilities, and that's just not the case in TMRS. And we don't take away that lever for future councils, if they got to the place, if you did adopt a repeating COLA where it's happening automatically every year and found that that's no longer sustainable, a future council could either reduce that percentage or turn it off altogether.
So what you're saying is we can't get in over our head because you won't allow it. You make sure that this stays funded. And that comes from the total contribution rate here that I'm seeing, we're at 2.2%. So if these COLAs, we jump up to 6.2%, 5.3 or 6%.
You got it, yes. Now, you have to decide what's over your head and what's not. But what we do show you is all the information that you need to come to that decision.
And so you're saying we have 1.8 million assets over liabilities. If we do this COLA, is that slowly reduced on the asset side being paid out?
It wouldn't necessarily be slowly reduced. It's going to immediately be reduced. And I think that's what Councilman in the blue shirt was getting to. And I'm sorry, I can't see your name tags. I apologize. I would address you by your names.
No worries.
But that was the point that he was making, is he had an opinion about a particular option because he feels a certain way about the way that he's seeing the dynamics at play. And that is, if you make a particular change, it's going to immediately affect the unfunded actuarial accrued liabilities. And you have to decide at what level is appropriate for you.
One last question then. Financially, how does this affect the city? You said that we are paying in about 195,000 in this year. By going over to say one of these that are more amenable to us, option 2 or 3, and that total contribution rate jumping from 2.2 to let's just say 5.3, what does that mean on actual real dollars from the city?
In real dollars, again, I would have to run the projection report for you, but I can tell you that looks like a difference of about $66,000 into TMRS versus $192,000 into TMRS, roughly. And again, your staff could probably give you more detailed numbers than I can. We're making projections. You all have an idea of what your actual payroll will look like for 2025.
And one final question then. This, coming from the perspective of education, we receive TRS retirement, but we also have the ability to spend into HSAs, which is something we could discuss tonight, but also like 457Bs and everything else. Do you see a lot of city employees moving up, supplementing these pension plans with other retirement income?
Yes, and it's city by city. Every city is a little different. I'm literally sitting at a city this evening, getting ready for another council meeting when I get off this call. And we've talked about this city adding a 457 plan to help supplement the TMRS benefit, because this city is in a position where they're not going to be able to necessarily improve benefits to the place that they'd like to, but they would like to give employees an option to supplement if they would like to. And many of our cities, most of the cities actually that I've worked with over the years, have a supplemental 457B plan.
Megan, do we have anything like that? No options for 457 or anything else? Okay. That was all the questions I had.
Thank you, Councilman.
In my view, the discussion we have to have as we think about what it looks like going forward is, we can certainly make a transition, put coal in. Then the question is, what happens when you have to make the decision going the other way? And what is the potential negative impact to employee retention and or employee attractiveness? So I'm a meter it through in a way that makes sense without getting yourselves too much in trouble. Because there will be swings.
I would agree that you and Megan are both financially conservative, and I think that's been a boon to the city, you know, to kind of get to get the city out of that kind of regard. And I think there's probably, when you talk about market, you know, the market, I think the market's heavily moved towards 457's options to supplement HSAs and everything else, just educating the employees on that.
That's, you just hit the nail on the head. Education around here, Zippo.
Yeah, to kind of move them that way.
Yeah.
So, because it scares me to create something that would be perpetual when there's a lot of variables. I know Mr. Mills knows when everyone's gonna die, but the rest of us aren't sure.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't know you by name, he just knows generally.
How much daylight we have. Don't point fingers.
But this is a great discussion. This is really.
Yes,
Yes.
I definitely want to get it on the table.
and we appreciate you, Mr. Mills.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. If there's anything that you all come up with after this evening, I know it's a lot to try and digest in one meeting. If you have additional discussions that you would like to run questions by me, Megan has my contact information and I'd be happy to assist. And it just so happened that I couldn't get out there in person for this particular meeting, but I would be happy to come to Alpine should you need me there in person. I look for the opportunity.
We would be happy to have you out here.
So Megan's, what's next as you think about this reworking budget? How do you see this playing into the next discussion?
I think the next discussion is gonna come into the actual new year, once we kind of understand where we're at for salaries. Because we are doing kind of a fixed increase on salaries and then we'll adjust employees based on compensation. I do foresee there being a little bit extra to go back and address the retirement side as well.
So you see it as a two-step process.
Yes.
Get the salaries, what we've talked about based on the compensation study, then come back and look at retirement and really to address that with a longer term strategy.
Yes, the salaries is the main focus when we look at recruitment right now. We've all talked about that. We do slightly advertise our benefits. We are one of very, very few that have like the 18 paid holidays. Most of these have 12.
Yep.
But I want to be able to, when we look at our retirement, say, you not only are you getting a good benefit now, but when you actually retire, there's something at the end.
Good.
Very good.
Well, I
Any other
think-
questions?
No.
No, okay,
I
anything
think
else?
we're done, Anthony. I will definitely follow up with you because I do have some additional options I'd like to run.
Sure thing. Thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Anything we
Thank
can do to assist, you're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, we're adjourned.
I'm good.
Nope, nope, nope.